There's nothing better than sitting back, relaxing, and enjoying a good game. What this means for you can vary, but for the majority of people, they'll think of games like Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley, and Minecraft. Or perhaps you'll find solace in games like Pokemon or Zelda. Either way, you cannot deny how nice it is to relax with some of our favorite games. In my opinion, gaming should be treated as something we use to clear our minds of stress and replace it with clarity and relaxation. Now, this doesn't mean that action games are bad at all, it just depends on how you view them. For most people, they'll tend to get quite attached to the results of their game. If we perform poorly in the virtual world, it can trigger us in real life. However, the opposite of this is also true. If we find success and happiness online, that sense of peace will transfer into our real consciousness. Regardless, we cannot pretend as if either success or failure in the virtual world matters much, as they are not real. But what does matter is how we're left feeling after playing these games. That very much stays with us for the rest of our day. To optimize our feelings of pleasure and put that towards our actual lives is the best outcome from this. If we're stressed about a test coming up, but we know that we're capable of handling it, perhaps instead of cramming in 3 hours of studying the night before, relaxing with some gaming might be a better choice. Not because of the activity itself, but because of how our mental state will be afterwards. Therefore, it is no coincidence why games that let us decide the way we play are so popular among those who choose gaming as a form of relaxation. Growing up, I always played these games with my mom, and I didn't think much of it. I really had no concerns about life at that age, so playing a cozy game was less about relaxing and more about just spending time with mom. Animal Crossing is one of the most popular life simulator games because it keeps things incredibly simple. There isn't much in this game that can upset you. Perhaps nothing, honestly. The most stress you'll encounter is paying off your house loan that has 0 interest rate and 0 deadline. In this franchise, the focus is put directly on your creativity. If you want to play this game for 15 minutes before bed and just fish for a bit, you can do that. But if you want to turn your town into a big city, that's also an option. At this young age, I also played a lot of Professor Layton and Ace Attorney, which were some of my favorites to play before bed. I think it's mostly because I always needed to ask my mom for help, which gave me an excuse to hang out with her. I mean, I did play alone sometimes before bed on our pink DS Lite, and I definitely had a feeling of relaxation, but I just wish I could ask my younger self what his mind was thinking sometimes. What was I really worried about, if anything at all? If I think back, my biggest annoyance was probably not being able to beat certain parts of a game. For example, if I struggled even just a little too hard at a game, I would ask my mom to return it. I don't even know why, but maybe I felt like my parents were wasting money on a game if I wasn't able to beat it. Two of my favorite games of all time, Pokemon Heart Gold and Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story, were victims to my incompetence. I still haven't actually gone and beat those games either to this day. But throughout all my life, past the age of 10, I played Minecraft, and this was my first cozy game experience, truthfully. Life was still pretty easy, but I started to have my first glimpse of the problems in the world. Primarily, it was loneliness for me. So when I convinced my mom to pay that $26 for Minecraft, I was super excited. I've been watching YouTubers like DanTDM, Sky Does Minecraft, and Captain Sparkles, and I was fantasizing about all the maps and servers I would play on now that I didn't have to play on cracked Minecraft. I remember it like it was yesterday, all those creative mode servers where I spent hours just building. That was my place of peace for a good 2 or 3 years of my life. I didn't need anything else besides that. As I got older, I've always played Minecraft and Animal Crossing on and off, but honestly, I grew out of it when I became a teenager. Ironically, this is probably when I needed to relax the most, but instead I spent my days playing stressful sports games and shooters. I don't regret these days, but if I put my time towards something a little less excruciating, I think my mental state would have been better. Fortunately, arguably one of the most chill games ever was released around this time, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. I feel like this game wasn't appreciated enough at the time, even though it definitely was, because it was just such a reliable game to play. I found myself spending an incredible amount of time just exploring, not even collecting anything in particular, but literally just walking around and hiking the terrain. Especially since the DLC came around, I still haven't finished anywhere near everything there is to do in that game. This sentiment isn't really something I share with Tears of the Kingdom, even though I think it technically should be. There isn't necessarily anything wrong with it, I just don't get that same level of interest from it. The next cozy game that made somewhat of an impact on me was Stardew Valley. The reason I say somewhat is because I don't remember feeling particularly happy when I played this game. I think this was sometime around 2020, where I think myself and many others watching this were at their lowest point. I'm not sure if I'm the only one who experiences this, but do you ever have such a poor time in life that your mind erases memories from it? Maybe Stardew Valley actually did help my mental a lot more than I remember. In fact, I think it did. For those unaware, this game consists of things like fishing, farming, and even relationships. During that period of extreme loneliness, I think this game gave me the things that I lacked. Not to mention, the game itself was quite fun to play, which is always a bonus. I gotta be honest though, this time in my life was not spent much on these pleasant games. This was the multiplayer games era of my life, where I literally spent every ounce of extra time I had playing Overwatch, League of Legends, and Valorant. And anyone who's played these games will know that these aren't necessarily the most relaxing to play. I don't think that these games can't be good to chill out with, but the way I played them was very competitive. Perhaps some of you will share this sentiment, so I'll share my experiences. For Overwatch, I dedicated several days of the week to an amateur team, which was fun for a while, since I was on it with some real-life friends. Eventually though, that became a bit too much to handle when I was balancing a part-time job, sports, school, and my side hustles. For Valorant, it seemed like all my friends were super into climbing the ranks, and while I also shared that sentiment, I was quite literally the definition of the angry guy who couldn't stop queuing. Ironically, League of Legends was the most relaxing to me, mostly because I just didn't take the game that seriously. And yeah, that's the thing. The reason why we find cozy games relaxing is because we don't really care that much about what goes on in them. Sure, we can still be a little annoyed if something goes wrong, but since the purpose of them is to make us relaxed, we aren't going to get too attached. If we fast forward to today, what games bring me solace? Well, I can't really say for sure, but I've had some great relaxing experiences with games like Persona 4 and 5. Perhaps this feeling can be attributed to their more story-based nature that kind of treats the game like an anime at times. These two games were quite life-changing for me, and I'd say these would fall under the definition of being relaxing, even though some parts can be stressful. I've also had some experience emulating some older games like Pikmin and Wind Waker HD for the first time, which was quite relaxing for me too. Even something like Bloons TD6 was quite a cozy game for me and was something I could literally play at any time. If I'm being honest though, life has been pretty good recently. This year I put a large focus on following my passions and becoming a YouTuber. I even took a gap year from college to learn about life and receive lessons I wouldn't have otherwise. As a result, I haven't really had much of an interest in hardcore gaming as I used to. Of course, I still play games a lot, but now they feel like much more of a reward to me. Post 2020, I really had two options: stay content with my sad and mediocre life, or start becoming the man I knew I could be. So yeah, I kept playing games, but I started developing better habits like eating right, going to the gym, and even writing, which was something I only thought I would ever do for school. Now I basically write dissertations on random video game topics every few days. There was a point this year where I actually quit video games for a month straight in order to focus on my work, and I learned quite a few things from that. While video games can be extremely fun, some of that time could certainly be distributed to more important things instead. However, I also learned that gaming is much more relaxing when you take that time away from it, because when I did return to it the next month, I noticed myself enjoying the experience a lot more. I didn't mean for this video to turn into a rant giving you advice or anything, but that's just the experience I've had recently with gaming. I guess the best way to describe all the games I've brought up today is an escape. Truly, I'm not a fan of treating games in this way because eventually we'll all have to return to reality. If anything, it's more like a pleasant distraction. Don't get me wrong, some of us are more than happy to have that, but for others like myself, we can't help but feel a little guilty if we spend too much time online. Sitting back and relaxing is one thing, but neglecting our responsibilities only makes our real life worse. In recent times, I've taken a very free stance to gaming. I literally don't care what the game is, but if I'm able to enjoy myself and relax after working all day on these videos, I'll play it. But I also have a firm rule that I always live by. If you get annoyed or angered by a game, stop playing it immediately. Following this has allowed me to enjoy myself almost any time I hop on a game, and I think that if you're struggling to enjoy games these days, you should try this mentality out too.